Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. I'm Josh Hinkle. In the 120 days of the Texas legislative session, lawmakers have just one job they must accomplish: pass a budget for the next 2 years. This week, the State House okayed the $210 billion plan after a long night. The House budget does a few things, like increasing funds for Border Patrol operations and fixing a hole in the teachers' retirement fund. As KXAN's Phil Prazen shows us, some other hot-button issues sparked a lot of debate.
With around 350 little tweaks to the budget, known as amendments, lawmakers debated for hours. Some ideas went through easy.
Amendment by Howard.
Austin Representative Donna Howard's first battle is to get the leftover money from the STAR test program to go to college readiness tests students take as 8th and 10th graders. In short, put your money where your mouth is. Last year, lawmakers cut the STAR test from 15 to 5. And leftover money should stay in the schools.
Acceptable to the author. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Chair hears none. Amendment is adopted.
Some were not so easy, like the $3 million that went from HIV and STD prevention to abstinence programs. Texas has the highest rate of teen pregnancy, also a very high rate of HIV.
What is your goal?
My goal is for everybody to be abstinent until they're married.
Well, and my goal is for everybody to be walking around AIDS-free, HIV-free, and to me, that's a goal.
Sylvester Turner argued over the money with Representative Stuart Spitzer.
That abstinence is the best way to prevent HIV. Abstinence is the best way to prevent sexually transmitted diseases.
Lawmakers voted and the money went to abstinence programs. There was a final stipulation. None of the abstinence money could go to the arch rival of social conservative politicians, Planned Parenthood. It's all in the details when crunching the numbers. Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
As it stands, the budget bill increases spending by more than 20% in just 2 sessions. To give you some perspective, back in 2011, the year of many cuts, lawmakers passed a budget worth $172 billion. 2 years later, more revenue brought more spending, with a nearly $197 billion budget. You can see how this budget compares at nearly $210 billion. Despite all of the action this week, though, it will still take some time for the budget to become law. Both the House and the Senate are working on their own versions of the budget. Once lawmakers pass the budget in each body, it will move on to the other chamber for further changes. Then it will move to the conference committee for more adjustments. And finally, the budget is sent to the governor, who can sign it into law. In the last legislative session, Governor Perry signed the budget bill on June 14, 2013. That's 2 weeks after the session ended. Texas senators hope a new bill will end favoritism when it comes to state contracts. This week, they unanimously passed legislation to ensure contracts are fairly awarded and monitored. The bill would require state agencies to disclose and justify any no-bid contracts. Governor Greg Abbott's office released a scathing report about Health and Human Services Commissioner Kyle Janik. His agency awarded a $110 million no-bid contract last year to an Austin-based Medicaid fraud company. The state auditor's report this week said operational defects allowed it to happen, despite policies and procedures meant to protect the state's money. Still ahead on State of Texas In Depth, we break down the budget to see what happens next. Representatives Larry Gonzalez and Donna Howard when we return. Welcome back to State of Texas In Depth. Even among who understands it, few pieces of law in Texas are as confusing and convoluted as the budget. But my guests understand it very well, just about better than anyone. We've got Representative Larry Gonzalez, Round Rock, Republican, and Representative Donna Howard from here in Austin, a Democrat. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So you're both on the House Appropriations Committee, so you've had a hand in crafting this budget. Since we're talking about Central Texas here, how does Central Texas benefit from what you guys put together?
I'm going first. Okay,
absolutely.
Well, actually, we benefit in a lot of ways. It's actually a very good budget. I'm very proud of what we did in a bipartisan fashion. There are things I think we could do more with, and we're going to keep pushing for that, but we're going to see more funding for public education. The House budget actually put in $3 billion more for public education. That's very significant. We also put in more dollars for transportation, and certainly transportation is a huge issue for Central Texas. Put in more money for the employee retirement system. Lots of state employees here in Central Texas. We're making that actuarially sound. that's a huge step forward. So lots more we could talk about, but those are some of the ones that I think that rise to the top.
And for you, the same?
Oh, I think it's been fantastic. I think the process was very good for all of us here. Luckily, there are several of us here in Central Texas who serve together. We work together very well. Donna and I sit very close to each other on the floor. So conversation throughout the day and throughout the night, and just constantly working with each other and understanding that as a region, it benefits all of us for everybody to get together and find those issues that make for a stronger economy, make for a stronger educational system, environmental. We did a lot of environmental things. Those items make us better as a Central Texas area, and that's what was important to us.
When you talk about environmental, I know you did some work for the Edwards Aquifer to help out things there. Kind of explain to me what happened with that funding.
Sure. That was your amendment, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, what we were trying to do with the Edwards Aquifer is to find a way to do a feasibility study so that we could look at storage of water, which would increase the capacity in our area. So we're just trying to find as many different options as we can for that very finite resource, as we're still in a state of drought. It's still a big issue for not only Central Texas, of course, but for our entire state. And Larry actually headed up that subcommittee that looked at that, and I worked with Larry, and he did a lot of other things as well.
We did. We looked at a lot of issues with the TCEQ state agency. We did a lot of air quality ideas as well for the monitoring to make certain that the Travis County, Williamson County area stays out of the non-attainment zone. So we did a lot of work in that area as well. It's always fascinating to me because, especially on the water issue, without water there is nothing else. So we have to preserve and protect the water, because then there is no economic infrastructure, there are no jobs, there is no manufacturing. So regardless of how you come to the issue of water, it still makes it the most important issue we do with the environment, because we have to have that ready to go to provide for all the businesses that require it.
With that leadership position, you also had to hear the budget proposal from the Department of Agriculture from your old House colleague, Sid Miller, who's now the commissioner there. Some people said that that request and that testimony particularly came off a little pushy.
That might be an understatement, I guess. I've been very vocal about this in a lot of the articles. It is difficult when you're looking at a 50% ask in one's state budget appropriations. What we did was we met the needs of the Ag Commission to be able to provide the services they do. They were a little short in some areas that we call consumer protection, ensuring that the weights and measures and the grocery store weights are calibrated, and that making sure that the gas pumps are accurate. So we did put some money to protect the consumers. But you know, when you come back to the body in elected capacity like that, it's important that you remember where you were and what you were thinking and the ideas you had, because those still remain. So from our perspective, we need to meet the needs of the agricultural community and what they do, protecting the consumer, but we still have a responsibility to be fiscally conservative, because we have a lot of other agencies who are fighting for those same dollars. And so understanding there's a limited pool of money, we need to go ahead and take care of as much as we can across the board.
And though we agree on a lot of things here, I think one of the differences that we have seen in some of the debates that have occurred have to do with how much money really is available to us to access. And one of the issues that the governor has come out in support of is early childhood education. And so pre-K has been a big issue for us this session. We had a lot of amendments dealing with pre-K. I'm really pleased that an amendment that I had actually got moved into the Article 11 of the budget to be considered as the bill moves forward through public education. My amendment was signed onto with support from Representative Huberty, who's carrying that legislation, from the head of the Public Education Committee, from the head of the Subcommittee on Education and Appropriations, and it provides more money than was originally requested to ensure that we do have quality pre-K throughout the state. So we made some movement there, but I think some of us would like to be able to access some of the other surplus dollars we have so we can really invest in those things.
And to that note, you know, we start the budget process about a year ago as state agencies prepare their legislative appropriations requests. Those are vetted out by the Legislative Budget Board. There's a base bill that is created. Then we go through the subcommittee process that Don and I sit on, and then it goes to the floor. So while this is a year in the making, this is still the first legislative step of a very long process. So we have a long ways to go, and we all know the Senate has a very different idea what their budget looks like than the House does. So this is still lots of room for discussion on various programs and initiatives, but the important thing about what happened the other night was to make sure that that first set of priorities is in the book. And this is what the House believes, and this is what we're thinking. Collectively, yes, there are always items here and there you can talk about, but in the totality of the budget, as a working document as a whole, it's a really good piece of appropriations, and we have a long way to go still.
Yeah, let's go back to schools. The House version of the budget actually gives more than what lawmakers are legally required to for schools, but it's still less than 2011 when we had the big cuts, depending on who you ask.
Right.
Do you feel like that does enough for the direction that lawmakers would like to go?
Well, I think that we've made some huge strides, no doubt about it. And the House budget does put significantly more money back into public education than the Senate version does right now. The fact is that as we've been putting more money in, we've been putting it in to decrease the equity gap that exists. And by doing it that way, some districts are actually getting more than they got prior to the cuts, but we still have districts that are getting less than. And from my vantage point, with all the surplus dollars that we've had, we're 2 biennia out from those budget cuts. It's time that we got back to where we were and make sure that all districts have what they had before we had those cuts. We've had growing population, especially of our poverty children and of the limited English speaking children who require more investments. We've had inflation, and so we are not where we need to be right now. We've made a huge step forward here, but certainly I think that with the money we have in place, we could do more.
I think what you've seen is 2 consecutive sessions of putting the money back. So last session we did it to the basic allotment, which really, as Representative Howard said, addressed that equity at kind of the bottom of the scale. But you're looking again at also fully funding enrollment growth, because in areas where we live, it's the enrollment growth that really puts a strain on the ISD. So being able to look at those dollars as well is extremely important for the Central Texas area, because we know the people keep coming and the kids keep coming. And so that's also extremely important to us as we built the budget, to make sure that we were looking ahead as well for the fast growth districts to have what they need.
You say it would take 4 years for us to get to where we need, but does Texas have that much time?
Well, no, I'm sorry. What I was saying, it's been 4 years since the cuts were made,
okay.
And we haven't gotten back to where we were for all districts, and I think that's way too long to have taken. So no, I definitely don't want to wait any longer. I think we could do more now. You know, Austin is in a very challenging situation because it sends the most money back to the state in terms of recapture. Our property taxes are high. A lot of that money is going to help other districts, which is a great thing. But we need it here in Austin as well. And the fact is that we have a huge population of children on free and reduced lunch. I think it's over 60-something%. And yet we're still subject to recapture and having to send a lot of dollars back to the state, when those dollars need to be invested here in those kids who really need the additional funding to be successful in school. So part of what we need to be looking at with our school finance lawsuit and the formulas that need to be addressed is, how do we really reflect the types of students that we're trying to educate and make sure that the dollars are going to the right places in order to be invested most effectively.
Knowing that that much money was put towards schools in the House budget, what kind of message do House members need to send to the Senate as they finalize the education part of its budget?
I think it's important for us to realize that the most important thing we do as a state, I believe, is educate our kids, because that is the cornerstone for everything else. There is no economic infrastructure if there's no educational infrastructure. In my office, we call that, you have to have a trained and trainable workforce. So it's making sure that K through 12 is a solid, rigorous education, but from the higher ed perspective as well. Making sure there are options there to cover every possible career and professional field. So we've diversified quite a bit in Williamson County. I think there are 9 universities just within the HD 52 area. Countywide, there's 11 institutes of higher education. So we're also diversifying that side of the education formula to make certain that we have the opportunity for kids to finish high school and then go into something very rewarding afterwards. So you have the public ed and the higher ed picture that work together to create what we have here, which is an economy that people look to, that people are coming from all over the country to be a part of what we've done here. And I tell people all the time, this is something that I did since I've been here. The people who came before me started creating this a long time ago. But I do think it's my job to protect it and make it better. And that's what we work on the House floor from a Central Texas delegation all the time. And I love that Representative Howard is there with us. and that we can have those conversations on the House floor with the proximity of our desks, because we're talking on the go. I mean, an amendment comes up, and what does this do? What do you think? And you can have those conversations on the fly.
Ahead, more of our legislative roundtable, plus reaction to one of the most contentious and perhaps awkward moments during the budget debate, when State of Texas In Depth returns. What kind of message does it send to the governor who had such a vision for the pre-K program in Texas with what House members have done to that program in the budget?
Well, I think we're all trying to work together on this, and I think the governor, by making that even his #1 issue that he mentioned in his State of the State, shows that he is behind this. And I know that he wants to move forward with a quality program. He wants to see that there are some things put in place first before we roll it out totally across the state, he's indicated. But I think what everybody's tried to work with him on this as we've crafted it to make sure that we're infusing those criteria into the legislation that we're trying to work through the system right now, and that we have even more money to take it further than what he may have originally envisioned. But if we can find a way to get to those additional dollars, we can at least roll it out to a larger portion of our students. And the longer we wait, the more behind those kids are going to get. These are the kids now that would be part of whatever's going to happen with our revamping of the school finance lawsuit. Let's start with them. Let's start with these young Texans and make sure they're prepared as we move through this to be the educated workforce pipeline that we know we are going to need.
The last thing I want to talk about with the budget was the whole debate between HIV and STD funding and abstinence. I mean, I don't think anyone really expected that kind of debate to happen on the House floor, where we were asking history of people's virginity and their marriage and how many people they've been with, that kind of thing. You know, do you feel like what happened at the end of that debate was the best result for Texas?
There were a few moments on that particular day that didn't meet the standard of decorum of the Texas House of Representatives, and people get very emotional, but you're also very tired, and you get a little punchy there at the end. But I think what I'm looking for is the room to keep the tone and the demeanor, and know that just because you are louder doesn't make you more right. And to be able to have a conversation at your desk in a civil tone, a front mic, back mic exchange that is respectful. Because I think when you start to lose that, you lose focus on the policy. What you're asking about was two very difficult policy decisions. I mean, things that people care very deeply about. And to be distracted, to have that conversation turn into something else, I don't think is what I would expect from particular colleagues who are having that conversation. I would like to have the policy discussion, what it is, what does it mean going forward if we make these types of decisions. So wasn't very appreciative of kind of where the conversation went in that particular time.
And as far as the health implications, you being a former nurse, what do you see as the impact to health here in Texas?
Well, you know, I have a little rudimentary sign I made and put in my office that said, "Welcome to Texas, a no science zone," you know, drew a Texas circle next to it. Because I feel like we don't make enough of our decisions here based on the evidence and sound public policy. We make it more on ideology and politics sometimes. I wish that we could get back to a place where we could, in a bipartisan fashion, with different ideological bents, look at the evidence and make decisions that really reflect best public policy. And we know we have significant needs in our HIV education and prevention area. To cut funds from one program to shore up another program that, from what I've seen, has certain advantages but certainly doesn't have the kind of evidence to support moving those dollars when we could do Abstinence Plus, which has been much more effective. It was more of a political maneuvering from what I think, where I look at it. And I don't think that serves Texans. I think we need to make our decisions based on the evidence and sound public policy. And I'm disappointed when we resort to these kinds of robbing Peter to pay Paul, especially when it's ideological.
Well, as you said, this is just the first step in a very long process. We have many days and weeks until the end of the session. So now we got to see what the Senate does and then meet in the middle somehow, right?
That's it.
That's the fun part.
In the middle, on our side, we hope.
I was going to say, not the middle, more
Yeah, right.
what the House did. We're a little partial to that version.
Oh, I imagine so. Yeah. All right. Thank you both for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. Remember, you can join us every Sunday morning in the 8:30 half hour for a broader look at Texas politics. Stay tuned for Meet the Press coming up at 9. I'm Josh Hinkle. Have a great day.